so. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, January 8th, 2020. Happy New Year to everybody. This is the Tri-Town meeting of the three towns, Bolton, Stowe, and Lancaster. Long time coming. I think it's been, almost 2 years since we've had the last Tri-Town
2
meeting.
years, November.
It was February 10th, last
Yeah.
February.
Yep, so welcome everybody. We have a lot on the agenda, and perhaps maybe to start off, maybe we can go around the room and just introduce ourselves. Some of us know each other, some of us may not know each other very well. We want to start in the back of the room and kind of go and around, and we'll get up here. Sure, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Joseph Gleason. I'm one of the Lancaster representatives to the Neshoba Regional School Board District of 8.
Great, thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Brian Boyle on the Bolton Finance Committee.
Greg Lauer, on the Bolton Finance Committee.
I don't know why everybody's standing, Brian.
You don't have to stand, that's okay. That's all right.
Kathy Cody-Ann, Lancaster rep to the school committee and also the school committee chair.
Brooke Clancy, Superintendent of Schools.
Joan DeAngelis, Director of Pupil Personnel Services with the Neshoba Regional Schools.
Pat Maroney, I'm the business manager for the schools.
Ralph Rezick, Director of Facilities for Neshoba Regional.
Todd McGuire, Assistant Superintendent of Schools.
Walter Sandrowski, Selectman, Lancaster.
Stan Starr, Selectman in Lancaster.
Jay Moody, Selectman in Lancaster.
Stan Wysocki, Selectman in Bolton.
Bob Sikansky, Selectman in Bolton.
Don Lowe, Bolton Town Administrator.
Jonathan Keith, Selectman in Bolton. Sorry.
Great, well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody tonight. It's getting kind of cold out there, so appreciate you coming out. We have a number of items on the agenda. I guess one of the main things that we're here is to maybe have an initial discussion about the fiscal year 2021 Neshoba Regional School District budget, in terms of where perhaps things stand at the moment. Obviously, a couple of items listed underneath, where you stand with capital, expected revenue, and the thing that's near and dear to all of our hearts is sort of the maybe preliminary allocations to each of the towns. So I don't know who from the...
I'm going to start, and then I'll turn it over to Pat Maroney. That would be okay?
Sure, that's fine.
Great, thank you. So again, it's not generally our customary practice to present to you folks prior to presenting to our school committee. So we haven't made a formal presentation to our school committee because I believe it's January 25th,
Yep.
that we'll have the workshop, and at that point in time, and we've done this every year since I've been here, and I think we did it even maybe before I came, we go through all the various budget lines, the various units for over an entire morning. We generally start around 8 o'clock in the morning, and we go through to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we talk through everything. So tonight is just to kind of give you a broad overview of kind of where we're at. Revenue, of course, it's hard for us right now to know because no numbers are out that are linked to us. So that really puts us in an awkward place to say, well, we think it might be this for any of you because we don't know. We have no idea right now. So we have to wait for those House 1 numbers to come out, of course. I know that Rob Frieswick is going to talk about capital items. Again, we generally go to each of our communities, as you well know, and talk about the capital items with the various committees that we work with. And so we'll be starting that process as well. But tonight, I think we wanted to highlight some of the high school, some of the capital items from the high school. And so you had a flavor of where we're headed with that. Our budget, and I think Pat will speak to our budget a little bit. Last year, I think we started in December, we were around 8% higher as a differential. This year, we were a little bit around 10%, which we all know is way too high. And so, we've been whittling down, and we still have ways to go. You'll see us bring that into play in the next 2 weeks prior to our meeting with the workshop. We'll probably have a little bit more after that point in time too, because that's when the school committee can ask their questions or say, we don't support this or that. And so you'll see some changes come after that particular meeting as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat, and you can do a bit of a broad overview with between you and Rob here for capital items.
Okay. First, I'd like to say that I'd like to thank all of the administrators that in our district that have put together the numbers. It's a lot of work, and I've always asked them to be very thoughtful about what their asks are, and that they have to keep the community in mind. Right now, we're at 7.91% increase in the budget. We have some work to do, and we have some initiatives that we need to think about how we're going to fund. I'd also like to say that we've lost some additional grant funding. It seems like every year we lose a little bit more, and that is going to be reflected in our numbers. We, this year, also presenting, our school committee voted to fund the full-day kindergarten, and we're going to fund that with a stabilization fund. We believe that we're in a position this year that we can fund the gap year. I don't know if you understand what the gap year is, but the state is always a year behind funding as far as for the students. So we get money in fiscal year 20 for students for our population in fiscal year 19. So that being said, increasing to the full-day kindergarten would be probably about $619,000, that's approximate. And we've decided, we have, in our budget this year, you will see that we have taken some money from some revolving funds that we found that we weren't going to use those funds. We've let them sit there for a couple of years, and now we've determined that this is probably the best use for these. And again, I said that the school committee has voted these numbers, but we believe that we have the funds available within our own funds and without coming to the towns for the full-day kindergarten. We're continuing to fund OPEB, and that is one other item that we're putting some additional funding in for OPEB this year, also coming from the revolving funds. That was very important to the school committee, that we continue to whittle away at what our liability is there. And as far as high school debt goes, you'll see that we have the, it's about almost $58,000 is the payment that we'll have to make on the debt, the additional debt for the oil, the leach field and the oil tank replacement that we had to do over the summer. That project is complete, and the first payment for that would come in fiscal year 21. That will also be in our budget.
So is that a 5-year term, Beth?
Yes. No, it's a 10-year,
10-year term.
10-year. And we're going to look at that every year, and again, we've had some requests that we maybe look at paying that off a little bit if we have surplus funds at the end of the year, and we are considering that.
We said that right at the beginning of this process, Pat and I, when we talked about the oil tank in the leach field, that we knew it was going to be around $500,000 or $600,000, and we said, we wanted to make a commitment to make sure that we paid that off as quickly as we could if funds were available. We're waiting for a certification for E&D, and then when that happens, probably within the next month and a half or something like that, we'll take that money, the numbers to our school committee with our suggestions of what we would encourage them to think on. But we see ourselves being able to pay part of that overall number down this year. I think the grand total was, I want to say $498,000, $500,000. No, I think it was right around the $500,000 mark, the combined projects.
Yes.
So it was under what we anticipated it was going to be. So we were very pleased with that. And both projects came in, and Rob can speak to this in a minute if you've got questions. I think that both projects were relatively smooth. They had a couple little glitches along the way, but they were typical glitches, like when well, not really typical, but things that you'd expect, some stuff's going to go wrong. For example, when they first started to dig to do the leach field up in the upper field, they came across, I don't even know how to describe it, Rob, like a
debris field. I think when they built the athletic fields, all the trees that they cut down, the stumps, they just kind of pushed it into one corner, and unfortunately that was right where the leach field was gone.
So that was kind of like one of those little glitch moments where he said, okay, well, what can we do? And then we were able to just move the field over, was it 15 feet or something like that?
Before we just shifted it.
Just shifted it. And so we were able to do it. But so those are the only kinds of glitches that we had. Everything else went really quite smoothly. So everything's complete now, Rob?
Yes.
And so we feel that they were good projects. And now we've got the money in exactly as we had said right at the beginning, that town administrators, when we talked about this, we knew that the first payment would not be until this fiscal year, so we knew that. And that's what she's referring to right now.
Could I ask a couple questions here, please?
Sure.
Perhaps, I think I heard the REIT budget was $480,000 on the leach field / oil
The
tank
total,
removal for that work.
the total that we ended up borrowing, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I missed you, you may have said it, I'm sorry, I may have.
Yeah, so what was about,
480.
yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and 180?
No.
400.
480, okay, that's right, okay, so 480, how much was actually expended? Are we finally done with that work?
All of it, 480,000.
We're on the budget.
A little bit
480
over.
budgeted, 480
$400
paid.
over.
We actually expected it would be closer towards 600, to be honest with you.
Initially, I know you had
Right,
mentioned that.
and so we were really quite pleased that it came in where it came in.
Yeah, and I heard, Kath, I think you mentioned something about the stabilization fund, using it temporarily. Will that be replenished? Is that what Bolton's plan is to use, or is that your?
We don't have a stabilization fund for the oil field, any facilities. We
Yeah, I'm
only
talking about
have-
the early kindergarten situation.
Oh,
I got a couple items, I'm sorry, I'm jumping
Okay.
in here. I'm a jet lag, so you got, excuse me. I just got home last night, so I'm sorry. With that being said, I heard you say stabilization
Yes.
borrowing, was that correct? For what purpose, and would that be replenished once the state reimburses the following year?
No, we wouldn't need it anymore after that. We, actually, we applied to the state for a special stabilization fund for the full-day kindergarten. And we're funding it with revolving funds and E&D.
It'll be self-funding?
And there's one,
Yes, I hear it.
in fiscal year '21, there is, in fiscal year '20 and '21, there was funding for the full day K, and that's how we come up with the full 600.
I'm almost afraid to ask this last question, but relative to the OPEB, what's the target needed currently? I know it moves every week, but is there a ballpark number? I know what our town has needs for, just shy of 3 million and change. What's the impact on the school?
The total,
What's
the grand total is over 40 million.
40 million.
It's over 40, I think it's
Yeah.
around 40.
We're probably well on our way to fund that, I
budget?
suppose.
No, not the budget. He's asking what's the total liability for OPEB.
Oh, for,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like 41 something, and we're actually in the middle of a new valuation as of this
Okay.
December.
It'll change
so-
tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will change.
And the amount funded to date is?
How much we got in that account right now?
Yes.
500?
I want to say it's around, I would say it's between 400 and 500 right now.
Okay, so we're almost there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying, I don't know, I know it's huge, but you gotta
Yeah.
start.
No, but prior to 4 years ago, there was zero. There was zero toward OPEB. So in the last 4 years, we've budgeted for it and also created a trust that the money's in so it can earn interest.
And that, actually, I think we ended up going with the same folks that you did.
Okay.
Yeah, the easiest part's always been to open up an account.
Yeah.
The hard part is to fund it.
But we've been steady with that. We have been steady in terms of, we have put in money from our budget, and we've also put in some additional funds, and that's what we're talking about when you see the certified E&D come back, and you'll see us come forward again with our school committee with both.
Just out of curiosity, in the bigger picture, do other school systems have the same sort of disparity of?
Oh, gosh,
Challenge.
yes. And many of them have got zero in their fund.
I suspected that, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you, no further questions, Your Honor.
So are we paying annually, are we paying into it what is recommended?
No.
Or we're just putting in a number
Would be
that
over
we
$1
can
million.
do?
That's really, we're putting in a number that we feel we can comfortably do.
What is the recommended amount annually?
I believe it's over $1 million.
It's going to be over $1
Could
million,
be.
yeah.
A year, okay.
Yeah.
Gotta be a million, it's a 30-year, 35-year plan.
Right, it's either, I think 35.
So for growth of 3 or 4%, you gotta be over $1 million
Yeah,
a
I
year.
think it's, I want to say it's like around 1.1.
Yeah, that sounds probably right. That is, yeah. That sounds right. Pat, as far as the debt goes, how long, do we have an opportunity to refinance any of it?
Every year.
Oh, we do, okay.
Okay, so I think, is that it for Pat, for a broad overview for the,
Yeah, I think that's,
and Rob, do you want to, you and Pat want to talk about capital items for the high
Sure.
school, please?
Just to touch base, we talked about the leach field and the oil tank. When the cost estimates, when we were working with the engineers, they gave us cost estimates for the project, and then when we finally went out to bid, the actual bid prices were way above what the cost estimates were. So we did some creative, with the leach field, we did some work in-house to try to get that number down, which we were able to do, to save money. And with the oil tank project, one of the things that we couldn't complete because we didn't have the funding to do it was the removal of the old oil tank. So that's one of the capital items that's, going forward this year.
How much for that, Rob?
The bid came in, because we had a bid alternate for that, and the bid alternate was $25,000. I bumped that number up to $30,000 just because of, cost increases. We're hoping it'll be, around there when, when it comes time to do that, and as soon as school gets out. Another big project at the high school is the track. It needs to, every 7 to 8 years, there's a structural wear layer that needs to be reapplied to the track surface. So you have your base asphalt layer, then there's a thicker rubber layer, and then there's a structural wear layer to keep the integrity of the track in place. And we're at that threshold right now where we need to have that structural wear layer resprayed. Right now we're looking probably at $185,000, but I believe we're going to be using stabilization fund money to offset some of that, so that way it won't be as much of a burden to the...
We've been proactive with that for the last 3 years. We set up a stabilization fund knowing that this was coming and have been putting money into that every year. So there's some funds there that we will use to
the
offset
first year that it went in was this year, because when we vote, it has to be approved. Stabilization has to be approved by the member towns. So it appeared in our budget last year. That was the first payment. Now we'll have it in fiscal year 21, and we'll be using some of that, but we're going to continue to do that because at some point in the future, we will have to replace the entire carpet.
Right. The carpet track itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some other infrastructure items that we have. Along the front driveway, when you pull in off of Green Road and you pull in the front of the school, there's a series of catch basins that are starting to fail. They're actually starting to cavitate, which is, poses a safety issue for people stepping off the walkway if they get caught in there. And also that's where the buses come down to pick the kids up. So just the weight of the buses driving over those manhole covers or sewer drain covers. We could have an issue with one of them really collapsing. In some asphalt repair around that. So we're looking about $22,000 for that. On the auditorium side of the building, there's a sewer ejection pump station that takes the sewer from that side of the building and pumps it down to the sewer treatment plant over on the student lot side. And there's a rail system that holds the pumps and the floats and everything in place. That's almost completely rotted away. So that's something that needs to be addressed, and we replace it with a stainless steel system, so it'll be there for a long time. We're looking at about $22,000 for that as well. There's some upgrades that we need to make to the sewer treatment plant. The filter modules that are in place now are starting to fail. They basically look like spaghetti strings, and that collects a lot of the debris. And those spaghetti strings, like I said, are starting to fail, so we're getting a lot of contamination within the system. So those need to be replaced at about $35,000 for that. There's an upgrade that we would like to do to help the water booster system, the longevity of it. Basically, we don't know, obviously what's going to happen with the building, with the new school. So we're going to put VFDs onto the water booster station to help the longevity of that, because if that fails,
Sort of what?
VFDs, variable frequency drives, because right now when the water calls, it goes basically from 0 to 100. So putting the VFDs on there will adjust that based off the demand. So it'll lessen the load and the life expectancy of that, without not knowing what that building's going to be the next 6 to 7 years. If that system goes down, it's going to be a significant repair or replacement for that.
So these are the pumps you're talking about?
We're replacing the pumps. It's the drive motors and, like I said, the VFDs to just extend the life of the pump system that's there right now.
Where do the VFDs go? Are they after the pumps or?
On the pump station itself.
Okay, so they push the water up from the pump through the building?
It controls basically the RPMs of the pump itself.
Oh, all right.
So like I said, so right now when it calls for water, it goes from 0 to 100, and adding those VFDs will, slow that down and basically give you on-demand instead of, taxing it out at 100% when we don't really need to. And there'd be energy savings there as well.
Price tag on that one?
18,000.
Okay. I should say 22.
What's that?
I thought you
said
said
22.
22.
No, that's 25. That's basically what we have for the high school. There's a lighting project that we'd like to do off of Green Road. As soon as you pull off of Green Road, there was a light pole there at one point that had gotten knocked over years ago. And with all the events and going on and people park, on both sides there, it's become a safety concern with people walking around during bigger events. So we're looking to add the light pole back there just for better visibility.
It's pretty dark.
Yeah, it's about 6,000 to 7,000 for that.
Anything else, Rob? Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to carry forward with the next item or not.
The MSBA. Well,
The assessments, you mean?
anything about the assessments?
Well, I don't think we have anything right now about the assessments because it's too
Without our
early.
revenue,
Without the
Okay.
revenue projections, we don't know.
I just want to add that Bolton has something that we refer to as the finance team, which is different than the finance committee. And we met yesterday, and it's defined as town accountant, town treasurer, chairman of the advisory committee, we have selectmen's representatives, board of assessors, obviously myself, town clerk, trying to forget, I think I'm maybe forgetting.
Treasurer,
one person.
accountant.
Yes, yeah, I did.
Okay.
And when I met with, when the TAs all met with Brooke back in November, and she asked us, what we were looking at for what we could tolerate within the budget, I had said, we can't hit 4%. And we've gone over, we've done our first pass modeling, and Brian, please jump in whenever you want. We quickly came to the conclusion, we can't take an assessment to Bolton higher than 3%. 4%'s out of the question for us. We're in really, really bad shape. I said last year, after we had the assessments done, that we couldn't have the same type of assessment increase last year because it just wasn't sustainable, and the numbers are proving that out. And we're being very conservative in our budgeting, but we're going to be in a really, really tough spot.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Don, if you're throwing that, and we're very similar numbers. We have our FinCom that makes these decisions along the life, and it's almost exactly the same number, 3 point something, but for all intents and purposes, 3. Anything over that, we go into deficit state, as we had last year, and we had to use stabilization. That's some last minute relief from some filming in town. It's not gonna happen again. You can't count on that one. So we're pretty much hard and fast with Bolton's assessment of 3%. And that's still a deficit.
Right, well, even with that, we're close to 400,000 in the hole with the numbers we have, so we have to find places, but that's with 3%.
I mean, we're looking at capital requests that we know, right now, I've got every capital request there is on my desk, and I already know we're not gonna fund all of them. It's a matter of how much we carve out, but, so the direction that I gave to our accountant yesterday was to use 3% as a plug number for all of our modeling.
Yeah, same as us.
MSBA?
MSBA? Yeah, awesome. So, as you well know, the school committee had approved last year for us to submit a statement of interest to MSBA with regards to the high school. And we did. We didn't get queued up. We got close, and they sent a team in to do a walkthrough of the building. They flew some people in from New York. We had a team that walked the building, and it was basically to just kind of check on the SOI, like, please, everything that they said in the SOI, is that true? Is that, they were just kind of walking through, just verifying it. And they knew right away, and they said, yes, like, this is a building that's urgent, urgently needs some good care. And so we knew that was really successful. When we didn't get queued up, they called right away and said the SOI was strong enough to just do a literal resubmission if the school committee chose to resubmit. So we did that, the school committee took a vote, we added a couple of the major things, like the leach field, the oil tank, and all those, the bigger projects that had failed in the year. We added that to the pre-existing SOI and did the submission. And then we didn't really hear anything until, I think, end of November, I think, and they called and said, we'd like you to take part in a readiness call. And I said, okay, and I didn't know what that looked like, I didn't know what it was. And so they said, you bring a team of people in, so we have some school committee members come in, a couple of different folks from our team, our school district team, and we sat in, and basically it was just the opportunity to say, do you think you're really ready for this? Like, are you ready for the work? Are you ready for the, all the things that are gonna come with this? That doesn't mean that we're ready to finance or anything like that, just are you up to this type of project, right? And we felt that the call went really well, we were really pleased with the call. And then that was kind of it, and then the next call we got was the call to invite us to their meeting. And they said, we're not saying that you're getting anything other than we're going to potentially put your names forward for the eligibility period. So we drove in that morning, we all left here at 6 o'clock in the morning and drove in, and there were 61 projects that were applications that were made for the core, which is the type of project we were looking at, because we're not looking at just an HVAC system or roofing or windows, we're looking at like a major modernization or a new build, and that's called a core. There were 61 projects across the state, and they put 11 forward, and we were one of the 11. So they moved that forward at that meeting. That was very exciting for us. And then they immediately took us from there, once that vote was taken, into orientation meeting and basically laid some things out for us. This is not to be confused with a feasibility study, because that's not what this is. This is an eligibility period. We've got a series of things. Each one of these pieces is like a module unto itself, the various stages of the process, whatever that is, whether it's modernization or a build. The communities at any point in time can say, we have no interest in doing this, and can shut it down at any point in time. So there's nothing taken for granted here. There's no assumptions made at all. So the eligibility period, there are like checklists of things that we need to do. And one of those things, for example, is that we need an education plan prepared. And so we had already seen that coming potentially long before we got accepted and queued up for the eligibility period. So we had already orchestrated for somebody to come in who has experience of doing this and working with our staff to start to lay out an education plan. And then that plan moves forward for the entirety of the project, for however long that project is. So our high school staff will start that work this month. We're having another meeting on Thursday, I think. And it's basically trying to envision and say, what does education look like in Neshoba for the next decade and beyond? What does that look like? So we're excited about that work. We have to kind of finish the checklist before MSBA takes another vote to say whether we can go out for a feasibility study or not. So it's not that we're in this eligibility period and we go immediately to do a feasibility study. There are very specific processes. And we have been very clearly warned that if we get ahead of ourselves, we will automatically be pulled from being queued up. Nobody wants that. So we will do exactly. We're good rule followers anyway, so we'll follow exactly what MSBA tells us to. There are, in essence, 2 time periods for votes through this process. The first is for the feasibility study itself, which I know everybody in this room knows about. And they are anticipating that it will be around that $1 million mark, maybe 1.2 million. That's kind of what they're estimating. That vote probably would take place within the next 2 years. The second vote that happens in this type of a process is the next 5 to 7 years. And that's when the communities make the decision of what pathway they're going to take. It's clearly outlined. We've completed all the appropriate modules with MSBA, and only at that point in time, again, would another vote happen, and then you would go out and look for funding for whatever that is. So you really wouldn't start digging, for example, even if you were really good, for at least the next 5 to 6 years type thing. So that's the type of timeline that they've given us, and that's the process that they've talked to us about. So I don't know if you have any questions on that. Bob?
When do when does the district have to make a decision on going forward with a feasibility study? And how are the towns involved in that decision?
So I don't know that I have an answer for you on that, because again, we'll do whatever the approach is that they tell us to take. And I'm not sure if there are templates or procedures that they've got for us to do. I assume that they do. We are working with a regional school district specialist. That's who they've put us with. So I'm sure that there's very specific guidelines that are laid out for us that we're just not aware of yet, because we're not that close yet.
There's not a deadline to get this, I thought there was.
2 years.
So you have
Within
2
the next
years
2
to have a vote on the
Feasibility study.
feasibility study. All right, I thought it was like 9 months or something like that.
No. There is a 9-month deadline though for something else. I can't quite recall what it is. We, and my understanding too, and again, this is all new to us, so, I hope I'm giving you all the right information as I'm thinking this through. We're not starting work with them either until after June 2020, and that's because they've taken these 11 projects and basically strategically placed them like one after the other so that we're not all starting at the same time. So we won't really start our work, so I think that that's why when I say the 2 years, we're really not starting our work with MSBA until after June 2020.
Okay.
So the feasibility study is not necessarily whether you need something or not. Is the feasibility study more renovation or new construction? Is that what the study?
I think my understanding is that that's when you take a look and say, okay, the feasibility study should offer, and Bobby might be able to speak more to this than I can, options that are available to the communities to take a look at. So, I mean, I don't think that anyone goes into this just making the assumption this is a new building. I mean, I know that Rob said that, but that's not our assumption. We'll do whatever our communities want us to do. If they want to do a major renovation program, then we can do that too. If they want to do nothing, then we can do that too. So, yeah, so that, I think the feasibility study, part and parcel, is to offer the options that make the most amount of sense to the communities.
Brooke, I know this is $1 million question, the multi-million-dollar question.
Multi-million, yeah.
What's the estimation of 5 years from now?
So, you know what, I really, in terms of the total project, so we were really guided to not give any type of answers on that, and I really do understand it, just like we were also guided to not give percentages of what the percentage might be for
The reimbursement?
the reimbursement.
I was about to ask you that second.
Okay, so great, so I'm not going to respond to that either.
Thanks a lot. That's very insightful.
No, well, actually, you know what, once you sit there, and Catherine, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything, or Rob, because I know you were, and Pat, you were there too, but my understanding, and I hope I get this right, my understanding is that MSBA kind of has like a bottom line, I want to say $330, don't hold me this, $330 a square foot, that they would put, let's say, 20, 30, 40, 50% towards. Except though, that's not what most projects cost. Most projects cost more than that. So if we were to say, let's say 50, just for the sake of giggles, because I know that that's not what it's going to be, but let's say it's 50. It's really not 50% of, let's say your school is going to cost, or your project's going to cost $500 a square. It's really 50% of the 330, because that's the bottom line. Anything else above that would be picked up by the communities. So it's really, it's not, I can understand why they don't want you to put numbers out at this point in time, because it's just far too soon to do that, because we really don't know what we're going to do.
And you know the heightened sensitivity relative to Minuteman's opening its doors recently, and the impact that has on the community's tax rate.
Please know that we understand that fully.
Yes, Brian?
Just to clarify on the timeline, because I want to make sure, this came up at a meeting last night of the Finance Committee, and I want to make sure we didn't give any wrong information. So when we looked at the MSBA letter,
Yeah.
it said that there was a local vote authorization required by February 26th, 2021, and then a feasibility study agreement by February 26th, 2021. So am I just misunderstanding about what
But
that means?
we have to make sure that everything that we've done has been done first, and then MSBA has taken their vote, and then we can take our vote.
Right, but so to assume that all of that has to happen within 270 days is not correct. It depends on whether they do what they need to do.
I think it depends on if everybody has done what they needed to do.
Right, but I thought you just said we had 2 years.
Does the clock, is there a chance that the clock starts again
I think you're right. My understanding is that that's why, again, told Holy this, but I think
Yeah.
it goes back to that June 2020 thing,
Got it.
as opposed to the date of this letter thing.
That makes
But
sense.
please don't hold me to that, but that's my understanding.
Okay,
Well,
no, that makes
you know, if
sense.
you could get some clarification on that particular issue, I know we're preoccupied with it here in Bolton.
Okay. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? I know it's a lot, and it's a lot to throw out there, and I hope that I'm speaking correctly with everything. Have you seen the letter that he's talking about? No.
I don't think I.
Okay, I'm happy to forward that out to the folks.
Okay. All righty, we're done with that. I guess Lancaster had put on the agenda, I'm not sure how much we have already discussed about it, but an update on the district borrowing for the high school, leach field, and the oil tank.
Did we answer all of your questions, or did you have
Yeah, I
more?
think Rob had.
Okay.
Okay, cool, all right. The next agenda item is one that the town of Bolton, myself put on, was sort of district mandatory reporting practices. And I guess this is related to a number of instances of vandalism that took place at the high school in the past, in the not too recent past, where town officials were not necessarily notified immediately about those particular incidents.
So we came prepared to talk about mandatory reporting because that's what's on here. So I think that's what we'll speak to. And then if there are other questions, then we're happy to answer them after. Would that be okay?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. So Joan DeAngelis is she's our Director of Pupil and Personnel Services, but she also helps to oversee all of our mandated reporting. And so she's going to speak tonight just quickly about 51As and such, because that's what we thought this was asking for. So I'll turn it over to Joan, and then if you've got questions.
I brought the law and the regulations so that you could.
So what's 51A?
So, mandatory reporting under the law is that mandatory reporters include people such as school officials, physicians, nurses, therapists, police, fire. So we're all under the law expected that if we are aware of a child that's being neglected or abused, or if there's suspicion of such, that we have to report that to the Department of Children and Families under the mandatory reporting law.
And we do that. I think we do that very thoughtfully. We're cautious with how we do it. I think the key is that there has to be substantial suspicion in order to do that. You can't do it on hearsay. You can't do it anything like that. On rumor, you can't do it on any of that. There has to be something absolutely tangible in order to do that.
There needs to be evidence that you can provide through a telephone call. So you call in what's called the 51A. There's actually a report that you need to fill out of what you have that the suspected abuse and neglect is.
Right.
And then DCF makes the determination of are they screening it in and they think it warrants an investigation, or are they screening it out to say, we don't believe we need to investigate. So our job is kind of not to play judge or jury. We leave the investigation to DCF, and then they make the determination about what the next steps are around the reporting.
There were some incidents at the high school where, as I understand it, it's a legal requirement to report these incidents, that they occurred, to the police and or the fire department, depending on the nature of the incident. And that's not been occurring.
So I don't know if those incidents you're referring to are under the umbrella of child abuse and neglect. So I'm not sure what
It's my
incidences you're.
understanding that they were not.
So this is about like kids being abused or neglected at home. But
Right.
what we're talking about are incidents in the school during the school day and
Where-
how those are
Where a
reported.
student did something to damage the school or violated some other, I guess, law, for lack of a more precise term. And it's our understanding that the school district should be aware of situations like that, and that they should be reported to the police or fire department immediately after the situation's under control. And in fact, there were days and days of as a matter of fact, the police officials, the safety officials in Bolton had to go to the school, as opposed to the school coming to the safety officials. And that's what we're inquiring about and wondering what's being done to remedy that.
So this is the mandatory reporting law for child abuse and neglect, so that's
Okay.
what I'm kind of talking about. So I think that what you're talking about
Is it different?
is different, right?
Yes.
Like when do we report things either to the police or fire officials?
Yes.
Okay, so
Doesn't that come under your umbrella? Even though you're doing child, it's got to have the whole school.
well, this is about child abuse and neglect, so if that issue comes up, typically I do get a call and we talk about, what the
So
incident is.
who
and
there
we
reports to
report it.
the safety officials?
Well, that work is generally done at the principal level. It's not done at the superintendent's level, it's done at the principal level. And if it's this kind of thing, it goes through Joan.
Well,
And
we're not
that's
talking
reported
about
back.
child abuse, we're talking about vandalism and
Right, and I'm still saying the same thing. It's the principals that file the 51As, or they are seen as the mandated reporters.
Were there not also, I heard somewhere through the grapevine of some fire concerns?
There was you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. There was a paper towel that had been set on fire. You're absolutely right. And I think that's probably where this is coming from, because
That's
as I'm
one
sitting here.
situation, yes.
Yeah, because that was, I think they found that, well, actually, I think you had some involvement on that too, now that I'm thinking of it. I believe that happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon of Friday, and.
Captured, there were 3 events, about an hour apart.
It was, yeah, it was the
wasn't
same thing, it was 2, am I correct, Lonnie? It was 2 paper towels, right?
one. No, well, we don't know, because there was no evidence. We do know that there were 3 different events.
Because I think it's captured on video, and so, if memory serves me right.
It occurred in the boys' restroom, so I can't imagine it's on video. There's no cameras.
No, I
in there.
believe it, no, I think there was a child that had videotaped it.
No, so I don't know that it was, I know there was something that was recorded, and it was one of the fire events that fire chief has said we have no evidence.
Okay, I'll go back and take a look at that then, and see. I haven't seen the video, I'm sure that I heard that there was one out there. Anyway, so to that end, Steve Cullinan, who was the new principal, did reach out Monday morning, so there was your time, your days that you're speaking of. So you're right, that he did not connect with them on the Friday night, he connected with them on the Monday morning.
I'm sorry, but that's not true.
Oh, okay.
That's not true. Our fire chief found out from our police chief, and he went to the high school to see Steve to discuss it with him. So our chief did not know.
Was that Monday morning, or?
That was Monday
another time?
afternoon by the time he got down there.
Okay, then that would be different than what I've heard, yeah.
so is that something you can help us with?
Well, yeah, actually, we did a review at the high school on January 2nd of the 51A. In general, like all of this, we did a review with all staff. So that was like the first day back after the
Including the
holiday.
non-child abuse.
Yes, the whole
areas.
thing was all
So
laid out.
reporting to police officials or fire
Yeah.
officials.
Okay.
So steps are being taken to
That's all 3 communities.
remedy
That's
the situation, because I know our fire and police chief weren't necessarily thrilled with how that was handled.
We understand that, and they've shared that with us.
Sure.
No, they have every right to. I mean, I absolutely understand that.
Okay, all right. Any gentlemen, anything else on this one?
No.
All right. Next one is district discretionary funds and allocations. This is another one that the Bolton Board of Selectmen and myself put in. I guess part and parcel with some of the discussion we had earlier about some of the loss of grant funding, and we actually went through a whole list of a number of repairs that have been need to be done at the school. I was a bit concerned and somewhat dismayed that there was an agreed-upon schedule put in place some time ago, and it's especially before it was voted to do the stabilization fund for full-day kindergarten, but there was a schedule in place to get full-day K implemented at the school. And I guess, it being so close to coming up with the budget season FY '21, that it appeared that, obviously, that schedule has been accelerated
By 1 year.
by
Correct.
1 year, due to the finding of some additional funding, whether that was healthcare or whatever, but anyway, additional funding. But a concern that was done in somewhat of a vacuum and not necessarily looking at potentially that surplus funding, where it could be applied, if it might need it to be applied, given the fact that there was an agreed upon schedule to get full-day K implemented. And, obviously you've accelerated that, but now you've encumbered that funding, and, you just said you've lost grant funding and we have repairs at the high school. So, I mean, I'm concerned about the timing of that.
Mhm. And I think that we had, and I'm very respectful of that. I think the other thing that we were reflecting on too is the fact that we continue to lose money every year. Like this year, had we been in the K queue up already, we have left $150,000 on the table this year because we weren't. So every year that we are not getting the appropriate reimbursement for K, we continue to go behind in that program every single year. So you kind of looked at it, and we looked at it and said it was, we knew it was $300,000, and we knew that that would pay itself off inside of 2 years. So for us, it made total sense to ramp it up by the 1 year. The other thing I would say too is I don't know that we ever agreed on the schedule. I think I laid it out, and then because I don't think we ever took a vote on it or anything like that. I laid it out as a 3-year. There was discussion on it, but I don't think we ever came to any type of agreement as such and said this is what we're going to do. So I don't think that that was how we were operating at all. And so when we saw this and we knew how much money we were leaving on the table every year, it didn't make sense because that's state money that we would have had in our pockets right now. So to us, it's almost like a wash, quite frankly, between this year and next year.
And if I could, I don't know what you see this or understand this done in a vacuum, because we have talked about it extensively at school committee and went back and forth. We did not have, and this is there are 4 new people on the school committee, so there was almost a complete turnover and differences of opinion. And I'm actually the senior member of the school committee. I've been there for 5 years. 4 years ago, it came to light that none of our programs that should be cost recovery were indeed cost recovery. Extended day, we were subsidizing to keep the boat afloat. Pre-K, integrated pre-K, we were subsidizing, and full-day K. None of the tuitions covered the cost, and it wasn't until we had our forensic audit that it came to light that we were paying upwards of $600,000 a year because the tuitions were established maybe 10 years previously and never increased. So I think right now, extended day is cost recovery, but we have every year increased. We had a big increase the first year and then agreed that we would increase them by 2% every year, which we have done.
Mm-hmm.
We have organized our integrated preschool to be in line with state regulations. The premise of that program is to support preschool students who are on IEPs and put them with what we call typical students. And there's a certain ratio. But for many years it was run essentially as a preschool, and we would have classes in the 3 towns with no special education students in them. So that was revamped, and I think it's cost recovery now in terms of, we pay for sped kids, but the tuitions cover the cost of the other kids that are in it. But full day K still does not, the tuition that we take in does not cover the cost. So we
Well, I'm
are
fully
paying
aware
for
of
it.
that.
Yeah, but we are paying for it, and so, and it's a hard, you look at what's out there, from OPEB, which will, I don't see us ever reaching
But all of that,
Yes,
all
I'm
of
sorry.
that information about the pre-K
Yes.
was known to you before you came to us and explained that this was going to be a 3-year program. And basically, no one has demonstrated any, here's a new information, or here's something that changed perspective. It was the same information that you'd had available at the time you came to us, and all of a sudden, this particular fact takes on an importance that it didn't have
Oh, no,
before.
I'm not-
And so it changed the decision.
It's a point of clarification from my point of view, because I think that many people on the school committee are aware, or in the communities, of the subsidies that went on essentially for people who are participating in this. I understand that you feel that we reneged on an agreement, but looking at it from my lens, from an educational point of view, understanding that I have a fiduciary responsibility to the town of Lancaster, there was an opportunity, given the fact that we had established a stabilization fund from revolving account money that had not been utilized. And now we have an opportunity to accelerate the acquisition of this program by 1 year. And the school committee voted to take advantage of it. Now, there will be some, given whatever that, funding is, the school committee in the discussions have talked about it being a priority to bring down the cost of what the towns had expected to pay for the leach field and the oil tank. So once the E&D funds are certified, then we'll take another look. We'll look at the money that we've got and what's left over, but that's our goal, to do that.
Okay, but this found money,
Yes.
what's the difference between that and your excess and deficiency fund?
It's,
I'm not sure that I understood the question.
it's not in the exit.
It's the money, like, we set up a stabilization fund last year.
Yeah,
No, but that's not the question.
we're talking about the excess money that you found and that you decided to apply.
Okay.
What's the difference between that and excess and deficiency?
It's not in the excess and deficiency account.
Not-
From
not
what I
as-
understand,
not
not
as
as of
yet.
now. It would have to go
Alright.
into it
And
in
then
order
we
for us to
take
access it.
note again.
I thought excess and deficiency excess was all the funds above, that you have unallocated at the end of the year, up to 5% of your budget.
That's right.
All right, and anything above that has to be automatically reapplied as revenue for the following year, okay? So.
We're nowhere near that. That's our goal.
Okay, so, all right, then if you're nowhere near that, I'm even more confused about how you can take excess money and just put it someplace else when you could be using it, again, to lower the allocations that are going to be coming down the pike in the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Right. And we do that every year anyway, because we pull money out of the E&D every year to put towards our budget, right? Like every year, that's a piece of.
Well, that's, yes, every
Okay,
year we
yeah.
hear, we're damaging our excess and deficiency because you townies are making us, we don't use the word townies,
I was
I
just
know.
saying, yeah, we don't talk about
You
that
do
at all.
not use the word townies, right?
Terms of affection.
Yeah, but, you folks in the town finance areas, you make us dip into the E&D, it's always hurting us, it's putting us in danger.
Oh my goodness,
Excuse me,
no.
Bob,
And then
please,
never.
that's not the tone that we adopt. I mean, you're painting a picture here that's adversarial, and I've never felt that. I get it, I get that we, the concerns about how the budgets go up and down, but the tone is not accurate from my point of view. And I think that I've never felt that we're under the gun by the towns to do anything. In fact, the towns have been very supportive and generous toward the schools historically, and you've given us a number tonight. And that's what
Okay.
we
Yeah,
have
and
to
that-
work
and
on.
quite frankly, that's what we did last year, because we worked towards Bolton's number last year, because it was the top one to get to. That was our our goal to get to that number. And what we did was exactly what you're saying, we pulled out of E&D to put in it, because it's like almost a dollar for dollar ratio, so that's exact. But I never would have thought that that was a negative thing to do at all. Like, I'm just putting that out there, because
No, all
I
right,
would have thought that.
All right.
I think the issue is that there was a schedule. You have decided to move it a year ahead. There was $100,000 that was going to be allocated in the FY21 budget to put in the stabilization fund, which was, everyone was aware of that. But now you've come into an additional pot of money, and the last pot of money outside of the allocations went towards the stabilization fund for this. So in the last two instances of found money, your highest priority has been to put it into a stabilization fund to allocate for full-day kindergarten, and that's fine. But we had a sort of gentleman's agreement that there was a schedule, and we had an anticipation that full-day K would start at this point. And it's now starting a year earlier.
Right.
In the void of looking at everything else relative to what you might need as far as funding for the FY21 budget. I think that's where our concern is.
So you would have had us leave that $150,000 on the table, because that's what would have happened.
Or no, take that, whatever the found money you had, and potentially you might need it for something else.
But I'm just saying, we're losing in this current year $150,000 in reimbursement that we could have claimed had we already been in that program for this year. And that's why I'm saying $150,000 over the 2 years is a $300,000. So it's honestly just a wash of money.
Well, you can say it's a wash of money, but
I mean, just in terms of the
right. I
numbers.
mean, it's almost like, I really need to buy this color TV set now because I'm going to get a rebate and something like that. As opposed to buying it later. So I mean, you can kind of work the things the way you want, and I understand that looking at it from one lens that makes perfect sense.
From a fiscal lens,
right?
Yeah.
But looking at it from another lens, we have an FY21 budget, school budget that we have to deal with.
Right.
And that's another perspective.
I totally understand that.
Right.
I'm
And my
very
understanding is that this discussion really didn't get started until this fall, because I know you went to one of the initial meetings that...
I would say the fall.
The fall, where this was discussed, and I believe you raised some valid points at one of the school committee meetings, the exact conversation we're having here this evening.
So are you thinking that we just started key discussion this fall?
No, to accelerate it.
Right.
To accelerate.
Right, by the 1 year. And like I say, when we realized the money that we were losing in this year and projected loss for next year, it didn't make sense for us to wait another year. So because it was 150 this year and 150 next year. So that was your $300,000. So it didn't make fiscal sense for us. Regardless of the philosophical, I mean, as educators, of course, philosophical is its own thing, but fiscally, it didn't make sense. We could have done it, but it wouldn't have made sense because we're already leaving $150,000 on the table this year by not being in this program.
Yes, but you're now taking away several $100,000 that could be applied to the FY21 budget that you don't have.
But I'm going to be, not I.
No, isn't that going into
No,
E&D then? Isn't that?
Oh, the other funds, there's I don't know if he's talking about the same funds, to be honest with you.
So are you talking about you've been referring to it as found money?
Yes.
So that so-called found money would go into E&D. We can't access it until it's in E&D, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so the impact that E&D would have on FY21 would be whatever money that we would typically take from E&D to put toward the budget, to bring
Right.
down the assessments.
Right.
Right,
So
which we do
you
every
s-
year.
So
But you have that much less now because you're accelerating.
Right, but we're getting back we'll be getting back like the 1 year behind that 150,000 right back. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that won't be applied to the 21 budget. That'll go into your free cash and you use it in 22.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is that you don't agree with the fact that we amped up the program by 1 year, is that what I'm hearing? Is that a good way to say it? Please don't let me put words in your mouth.
My words would be, I'm not sure that was the best use of the money.
Okay.
So does it become moot if we meet the 3%? You said that that's your number, 3%. If we get to 3%.
Well,
is it-
you know, to a certain extent, it's moot because you've already done it. Right? But certainly, the 3% is what we need. You know, we're not going to be able to do we're not going to be able to move ahead with more than that.
Mhm.
If it all pans out, that'd be great. But I don't think we know that yet. Right? I mean, you just told us you have no idea.
For revenue coming in, no.
Right, we have no idea, so let's,
We never know at this time of year.
let's hope for the
Yeah.
best. All right, I think we've,
Beat that horse.
yeah, that's a good way of saying
Can I
it.
ask a
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one
Yes.
question?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you want to finish it, please.
Well, this might be sort of a bomb that I'm dropping, and I don't mean to, but I'm just curious. Somebody mentioned the impact of the Minuteman building project on assessments to the town, and I know that I had a conversation maybe last year, the year before, with Stan in Orlando about Minuteman and Lancaster, and there are 50 kids from Lancaster that go, and the per pupil expenditure works out to like $32,000 a kid for Minuteman, but then if you just look at Lancaster's allocation in Neshoba, it's about $13,000 for the approximately 1,000 kids in Lancaster that go. So I know we're spending a lot of time, and it's important, and I get it. I've been in education my whole life, and for some reason I decided to be on the school committee and just prolong the agony. I'm just curious about the nature of the conversations with Minuteman to rein in their budget, because I looked, and again, looking strictly through Lancaster's lens, over a 5-year period of time, their increases to the budget as it would impact Lancaster was like double digits. Okay, so it was like 11%, but that's a lot. So how, is it separate? Do we not do this with them? Is there, because if that's expensive, is there any talk about looking at other schools like Minuteman, like Monty Tech, or Assabet? I think the towns could probably save some money to grandfather the kids that are already there through. So it just seems, and I'm being a middle school child now, it just doesn't seem fair that Minuteman seems to get a buy, and this is, yes.
I was on the town finance committee here in Bolton, when the Minuteman project first started bubbling up and getting active. And one of the things the finance committee did was to say, okay, we're not qualified to say what school district does this, that, or the other thing better, but it'd be interesting for the finance committee to have some answers on costs relative to Minuteman versus Assabet versus Monty Tech versus Neshoba Valley. Basically, we went to Don, who made some inquiries. They were all overbooked, and we're not going to take students from any other area.
Yeah, Monty Tech at the time, Monty Tech had a wait list of over 100 kids. Assabet was full and still is. Neshoba Valley had some room but wasn't terribly attractive to us. I personally have this conversation with Ed Boquillan every year. I had it as recently as today, wanting to know what we should be using for a plug number, which he gave me and said they're trending downwards from the plug number, which was good news. But Bolton hasn't experienced the same pain that Lancaster has.
I was about to ask you, what number of students you got going to Monty?
Normally it's 11. 10 or 11 every year.
52? Yeah. Is that our number?
And our percentage increases have been very small, of course, now with the building project and the debt and all that, but that's different than operating expenses.
And I think, Kathy, that's why some of the impact is more major when people tell me, oh my God, we're paying a college to raise over for having to send them there. There's no relief in sight. And as Don had mentioned, there's no room in the inn at the time. And we would have made a move a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, every town had the opportunity to opt out when the district agreement was redone.
That's right.
And the 7 got out and 9 remained.
Yeah.
And the state requires every town to be affiliated, is that the right word? With one of the vocational
Well,
schools.
I don't know that you have to be affiliated, but you have to provide it. You have to provide, you have to pay for vocational education.
One of the issues that came up at that time was making sure that schools who were opting in later were helping to pay for the construction.
Well, towns, yes.
Towns.
That's right. The towns would have to assume their fair share of the
So
debt.
is that happening?
Well, we don't have new towns in yet. We have the 9 legacy communities, if you will. But we do have a formula that was approved by DESI that we can charge, not
So if
just
Arlington comes crawling back,
if Arlington came back, or if Waltham decided they finally wanted to join.
They have a waiting list.
There is a wait list now,
Minuteman
Minuteman,
has a
yeah.
waiting list.
It's full.
There's no opportunity for a bunch of students from any particular town to get
so
in
it's
there.
filled with the original towns that
It is.
subscribe.
Yep.
Okay.
Just had to ask.
Yeah, no, I
No, that's
mean,
fine.
we went through
Fair-
that.
fair question.
Right. No one's trying to pick on anybody. But last year, I'm being very blunt, last year was the tipping point for Bolton. 65% of our budget is going to you guys. Last year we were at a tipping point. We had severe issues in terms of trying to balance the budget. We normally try to keep, at the end, when we're done, about $325,000 in free cash, and that's way down from years ago. I've been doing this for a long time, and we used to have, 7 figures left over, and those days are gone now, because we've squeezed our budget down where there's nothing left at the end of the year to replenish free cash.
We literally have $125,000 in free cash.
So we went way down in free cash last year, to about $125K. So we're at a tipping point, and the fact that we're a bedroom community, we don't have a lot of business, this, that, and the other thing, so.
No state aid.
And no state aid, which actually is a good thing, and that's one of the things the standing boards really looked at and was happy that we have very little state aid, because that's one of the things that contributed to our AAA bond rating. But we hit a tipping point last year, and it's only going to get worse. So, we have to be very mindful of everything, because the last thing that any of us want to do is to go beyond on 2.5. So so we're not picking on you, but we're watching every single dollar, and we just get concerned. Obviously, the biggest driver of the budget is the district, and that's just obviously the reality of the situation. So.
And one data point that folks may or may not find interesting is that when we got our bond rating increased by Standard & Poor's from AA to AAA, there were two of the major factors that drove that decision for them was, one, our commitment to funding OPEB. They were very clear they would not have given us that increase if we were not funding OPEB. And 2, that we have such a small reliance on state aid. So while it's bad news for us that we don't get more state aid, they see us as that much more stable financial position, because we're not at the mercy of the vagaries of state aid.
Yeah, and just picking up the theme again, you beat us by, well, we beat you, sort of speaking, the tipping point. That happened to us last year. We were deficited, again, extraordinary expenses, higher than average free cash, and some income, 150, 200-ish from filming within the community. Otherwise, we'll be, and we're going to be there again with this, even with 3%. We're going to be sitting at, between the 2 years, a $500,000 deficit. We don't have it. We have to rely on a development that's 2 years out in North Lancaster. That's the only savior this town of Lancaster is going to have. And the more people recognize that, the better off we'll be as a town to understand that. So that's my little soliloquy for the evening. I do have one other question, Mr. Chairman, related perhaps to the discretionary funds, if I may.
Sure, please.
Is there a defined source of funding for the ongoing investigation for the alleged teacher's misconduct? Has that been accounted for within the budget? Is that an expense of the district? I'm assuming,
The investigation,
of a
the
Neshoba Regional
The
teacher's
independent-
misconduct.
that's,
The independent investigation that's right now, that independent investigation is just looking at like a small window of time. And that's, I don't know how close it is to wrapping
I have
up.
no idea, but if we, at the outset, the individual that we hired indicated that this would, he didn't have consecutive time to deal with it, he would be fitting it in. And so there have been updates the last 2 school committee meetings. So the amount of time does not equate to the amount of money we're going to spend. So if it's been a month, he's not charging us for a month's worth of time. He charges us.
Yeah, I had several citizens ask
So, but
who's paying
that's
for it.
coming out of, it's in the FY20 budget.
It's been budgeted.
But, well, it hasn't been budgeted. There's a
But
line
it's a
item
request.
probably for legal
Report.
expense. I don't know if it's legal expenses.
It's a legal expense,
Yeah.
but we have money.
What's being budgeted for that item?
Well, generally, all of our legal expenses, and we upped it last year.
But for something extraordinary, maybe this isn't extra, I think it is, but what do I know? There's no number associated with just that particular current investigation.
No, there isn't.
There is
It
not.
wasn't like, that isn't how we came to the number.
Okay.
Typically, that legal line is,
Came out of your legal funds.
right, just,
Set
in
aside.
yeah.
Okay. Hopefully it won't be any other, hopefully.
Well, I guess it's a corollary to the corollary. My understanding is that, due to the situation, the district has hired a public relations firm.
We did under, with guidance from our legal counsel.
So I guess maybe the other question is, where is that money coming from? And is that being accounted for?
That's on contract line,
Contracted, yeah.
contracted services line, yeah. So it's in there as well.
Is that firm still being retained?
They're on retainer, but we're not using them right now. So they're just kind of sitting tight because we're not sure what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. So they're on the sit and hold.
Gotcha, okay, all right. Anything else relative to that?
No, sir.
I guess next up is discuss the frequency of future meetings, since we managed to get this.
And I think 2 years is
Yeah, everything.
So January 2022.
Put it in my calendar right now.
Stole my line, Bob.
I mean, since you're having a workshop at the end of January, does it make sense to have something scheduled for potentially next month?
It's completely up to you. Like we'll
Well,
be wherever you
the
ask us to be.
The budget will be, the allocations to the town are going to come out when?
It's usually the last week
Of
in
January.
January. We'll
Yeah, so
probably
sometime in
be,
February.
I would-
probably be Friday night before the Saturday.
That's typically actually what happens.
That's what happens every
Yeah.
year.
So whatever the off Wednesday is in between the school committee meetings, I guess would be the
That's
night.
Okay.
So school committee in February is the 12th and the 26th, is that correct?
So then,
And you got a vacation week in the middle here.
Yeah.
With
That's
you?
correct.
Yeah, school committee is the 12th and the 26th of February.
Will that be a Lancaster host for the meeting?
We would love that.
yeah.
Would you put the cider on ice?
I'll just put it out in the air and you can just invite
Outside
it.
by then.
It has to fermented by then.
So if the vacation week is the week of the,
17th.
yeah, then I'm wondering if March 4th is the meeting then, because the school committee's meeting the 12th and the 26th. So it'd either be the 5th, you'd have to have it early on the 5th of February or later on March 4th.
I'd say March 4th.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
as
I think
needed,
that's
I don't, much as I love this
Yeah.
conversation, it's
Yeah.
necessary and great if it proves, and this is a very fruitful meeting I thought this evening,
Mhm.
even though there's some limitations that we all know.
All right, let's shoot for March 4th then.
And would you like to take the cider now, or should I?
I've had my allocation, thank you. Did you
So
check
it's
with
the
Tornado on
4th
that?
at 7 o'clock?
Yes.
And it's,
Did we get a date?
Right.
3, 5?
March
and it's
4th?
going to be at
March 4th.
Lancaster?
Before.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then actually,
The newly renovated National Road,
Yeah.
Prescott Building, Lancaster. Home of the Patriots.
The town hall came out beautifully, I thought.
That stayed the same, but the Prescott building was.
I'm sorry, the Prescott building, yeah. I thought, well, where the town offices are now, I'm sorry.
Town hall is crumbling.
I thought it came out really, really nice.
They did a great job. It really is a very impressive.
See.
Any other new business or anything else anybody would like to bring up before we adjourn?
Oh, I should just add for everyone's edification, and back at the November meeting that we had, the TAs had with Brooke, my colleagues voted me in by acclamation to be the municipal rep again for future contract negotiations. So whatever.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I know, I had lawn signs all over the place. Last time I did that, I didn't win, but, just so you know, whenever negotiations get started, I'll be enjoying your company again.
Okay. Cool. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. We'll
Move to adjourn.
move to adjourn. Everyone, we'll see everyone on March 4th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We always do 7 o'clock, right? That's the standard.
Yeah.
We can't do earlier than that. Is that a-